I've seen, if you will, the dark side of the food industry and how product is produced. I've actually been in slaughterhouses. So like many people, I came to an awakening, that if in fact there's another way, and it now is another way. That was the way that we all knew when I grew up, and that was the food industry. And I'm so excited to have learned about this opportunity that cell-based represents, and to see the opportunity that, in particular, that seafood represents.
Welcome to the Business for Good podcast, a show where we spotlight companies making money by making the world a better place. I'm your host, Paul Shapiro, and if you share a passion for using commerce to solve many of the world's most pressing problems, then this is the show for you. Greetings and welcome to the 32nd episode of Business for Good. If you are listening to this episode when it drops, then Happy New Year. In fact, actually, Happy New Decade. I'm glad that we are in the 2020s, if for no other reason than that it just sounds better to say that we're now in the 20s than when we were in the aughts or even in the 10s, or maybe it was the teens, I'm not sure. But either way, welcome to the 20s. In this episode, you are going to hear the story of one of the best funded cultured meat companies in the field, BlueNalu, as told by their CEO, my friend, Lou Cooperhouse. Their company didn't exist when I wrote the book Clean Meat, so I'm particularly glad to get to use this platform to spread the good word about their work to turn the tides for our oceans, and I hope it inspires you to put your own oar in the water, toward a more peaceful relationship with the animals on our planet who live, just like Sebastian in The Little Mermaid, under the sea. Now, if you read Clean Meat, you know that many of the companies in the space were founded by animal advocates seeking to prevent the factory farming of animals, or by environmental crusaders wanting to mitigate the meat industry's deforestation or greenhouse gas emissions or more. But that's not exactly Lou's background. Indeed, as you'll hear in this interview, Lou worked for decades in the conventional food industry, including making chicken nuggets for ConAgra. Well, now he's left that life behind and has started his own cultivated meat company that is seeking to let fish off the hook by growing their cells into delicious cuts of real fish meat that's better for consumers and for the oceans. We taped this show at BlueNalu's headquarters in San Diego, just a short distance away from the Pacific Ocean, right before the company revealed its latest offerings, whole muscle meat yellowtail that it grew without the fish, and how impressive it was. While those of us who were there were certainly focused on the food that BlueNalu was unveiling, it wasn't lost on me that had we been in that same spot just 150 years earlier, there'd have been boats hauling in whales who'd been slaughtered to keep our lamps lit at night with their whale oil. But thanks to technology like kerosene, the whaling industry was relegated to the history books within a matter of just a few decades. Well, I'm convinced that similarly, technologies like those that BlueNalu is pursuing may relegate the idea of ocean trawlers to the past as well. And we may come to think of such boats, both whaling boats and those today trawling for massive amounts of fish at the bottom of the ocean, as representative of an archaic past that we will be glad to have moved beyond. Just how are they doing it? Well, we just passed Christmas, and we all know that the central figure in that story is a Jew who's said to have taken a small amount of fish and multiplied it to feed thousands. Well, in 2020, we now have another innovative Jew, Lou Cooperhouse, who is literally multiplying the fish, or at least multiplying their fish cells, in the hopes of again feeding the masses and saving our planet at the same time. So sit back as I now bring you BlueNalu's Lou Cooperhouse. Lou, welcome to the Business for Good podcast.
It's great to be here, Paul. So glad to participate on your show.
I am honored that we are not only talking because I really respect and admire you, but I'm even more honored that I am in your headquarters right now, the BlueNalu official HQ in San Diego, virtually oceanside. It is a real pleasure.
It's great to have you here. And it's, of course, another beautiful day in San Diego where the weather's always warm.
Yeah. I moved from the East Coast to California expecting sunny California all the time. Little did I know that Sacramento during the winters is actually not that warm.
And I too moved from New Jersey, so lived for the last 20 years in the East Coast as well. So excited to be out here in the warm weather for sure.
Nice. Now, I presume by you saying New Jersey, knowing a little bit about your background, is that when you were at Campbell Soup?
That's correct. I was at Campbell Soup early in my career, went to school at Rutgers, and then went out west for various great opportunities in the food industry.
All right. What did you study at Rutgers?
And then came back east again. So I studied actually food science and microbiology.
Nice.
Went to work at Campbell's. My whole career, 35 years of which has all been in business startups within the food industry, initially large companies, and then subsequently several entrepreneurial startups. And then in more recent years, was executive director at the Rutgers University Food Innovation Center, helping other entrepreneurs start businesses. So always been doing startups, and discovered an amazing opportunity here at BlueNalu, which we'll talk more about, I'm sure.
Okay, well, I'm eager to hear about that. But let's first get started from the beginning. What got you interested in food in the first place? So this is decades ago, although you look like a young man. So I know you say it's 35 years in the food industry, but whatever you're doing is working for you. What got you into food? Why are you studying microbiology all that time ago in food science? What do you want to do?
Well, initially, I was just fascinated by the what you can't see in the world, microorganisms. And I actually had a job while I was at Rutgers, going to grad school, working at Campbell's Soup at one of their subsidiary companies, and I became fascinated by the food industry just through that experience. I decided at that point to switch my master's to food science and actually apply the integration of microbiology and food science in the field of perishable foods, foods that actually degrade over time and spoil, and actually learn how I could maximize the sensory characteristics of food, as Campbell's at that time launched into a whole line of refrigerated foods back in the 80s.
Oh, that's really, really interesting. So you're doing all this work for Campbell's. You decide you're going to move out west. I know that you did some time at ConAgra as well, right? Where you were working on chicken nuggets, I think it was. Is that what I heard you say one time?
And a bunch of other things. That's correct.
Okay. I remember you told me, I don't remember if you told me or if I'm conflating the memory with me hearing you give a speech saying this, but I remember you talking about the number of nuggets like per second that you were producing. It was incredible.
That's true. So after Campbell's, I went out to Arizona, where I was a group leader of a processed meats operation for ConAgra, which actually produced one heck of a lot of chicken nuggets, hamburger patties, just a whole array of different products for food service and retail markets. And you're right, in the case of chicken nuggets, we were probably doing several 100 per minute easily. So it's a highly automated organization. So yes, my career began in the meat industry, the food industry in general. And after ConAgra, I went out further west to Northern California, actually in Marin County, where I was a VP of R&D for a company that was ultimately acquired by Nestle, doing what's called sous vide, processed foods that are manufactured with vacuum cooking technology.
Oh, interesting.
Resulted in really high-end value-added protein products.
Now, just on the topic of chicken nuggets. So I talked to a good number of people in the poultry industry, and I heard not that long ago, and I'm hoping you can confirm or deny this, the most expensive part of making a chicken nugget is not the chicken, but it is the oil. You think that's true?
I'm not sure that's true.
Okay. All right. Because when you hear that, you just think, man, these chickens are doomed. Like if the chicken is really that cheap, like how can the plant-based
I don't think that's true. So obviously there's chicken, there's other ingredients that go into the chicken product, and there's about maybe 30% breading that goes on that product, and then the product is fried in oil.
Yeah.
But I would still say it's the chicken that is the expensive ingredient of that, but also any other protein concentrates that might be in there.
Okay. That's interesting. I definitely want to get to the bottom of this for a lot of reasons, but I hope that you're right for the sake of these birds. It would be, of course, preferable.
Absolutely.
So you've spent basically a career in the food industry, including in the meat industry. And now you're doing something, yes, still in the food industry, but you've decided to take a different turn in your career where you are producing real fish meat, however, without the fish. So what led you to see this? You alluded earlier, you said you learned of this opportunity. Was the company your idea? Like, how did BlueNalu come about?
Yeah, great question. So I think throughout my career, Paul, I've really been part of, as I mentioned, all sorts of food innovation, food trends, food technologies. So I've been very much on the front end of all sorts of innovation, not just companies I've started, but also companies I've witnessed start, through my experience at Rutgers. So for 20 years, I also was executive director of the Rutgers Food Innovation Center. And even one of my clients was Impossible Foods that did their US launch out of a New Jersey operation that I oversaw. So during that time, I just witnessed so much innovation. And what I also saw was a shift in consumer behavior. So I saw that consumers, early in my career, were very focused on products that were healthy for themselves or convenient. And they were starting reading labels, but differently. They were starting to look at products that weren't just good for themselves or their family, but also good for the planet. So food really took on a much more of a social mission for consumers. And I was really seeing that in the kind of products that were being represented and in the kind of products that were really appealing, not just in the US, but globally. So in that category of new opportunities in the food industry, I was really witnessing alternative proteins. So like Impossible Foods and Beyond Meat and many other products, what I saw was kind of, in my mind, a third generation. So the world began with land animals as the source of our protein. But several decades ago, as we all know, products like Boca, Gardein, and others, were on the market that were really appealed in many cases to the vegan audience. And they really didn't command a great penetration in the market.
Yeah,
we'll call that generation two.
I was one of them. I was one of the early 1990s Boca Burger consumers. And, when you don't eat meat, it's actually quite a good option because you're like, oh, it's kind of like a consolation prize in many ways. But I remember back then, President Clinton was announced that he was eating Boca Burgers for his heart in the White House. And I thought that was so cool that I was eating what the president was eating. But,
That's cool.
I don't think I ever really thought they tasted just like meat, but I certainly thought that they tasted good enough that they were satisfying for me. But I don't think they were fooling any meat eaters into thinking that this was something other than a veggie burger.
And exactly right. And I think what happened since that time, what really brought on the excitement around Impossible and Beyond and other products that really are now kind of, I'll call this third generation of products that actually provide the same sensory characteristics as meat without meat, using plants. Fascinating technology improvements that really provide no to the consumer. They haven't compromised on their. As I've learned in the food industry, the number one criterion for repeat purchase of food is taste.
Shocking.
So having all the sustainability and other benefits are really important to many people. But obviously, it's quite logical that we've now seen that consumers also don't want to sacrifice on taste. And they really want to have that feeling that they've actually had meat without the meat, and they feel better about that.
Well, why do you think they feel better? Do you think they think it's better for them, better for the planet? Like, what do you think is driving this increase in popularity of plant-based meats?
I think that people want to do the right thing, and they want to commit and make it their own personal solution, and hopefully encourage others to do the same thing. But they also don't want to give up on their own flavors and textures and characteristics that they expect meat to provide.
And just to press you on this, Lou, when you say they want to do the right thing, like what does that mean? Like, the average Burger King consumer goes in, orders an Impossible Whopper. Is it they're thinking, I want to do something better for the planet, I want to do something better for myself, for animals? Like, what do you think is driving? Of course, I'm sure there's a diversity of motivations, but by and large, what do you think it is?
People want to win-win. They want to win for themselves and they want to win for the planet. And I think that what they haven't had until Impossible and Beyond was, really a win for themselves. And people over time will evolve, and they'll say, if it doesn't taste the same, that's okay. So I think it's really, life is all about, a pathway, and I think, what Impossible Beyond is really helping you with that pathway to do something that is good for the planet by initially giving you something that you don't feel like you're compromising yourself. So, again, that's what I call that third generation.
Okay.
And back to your question about how did BlueNalu come on my horizon? Great ocean pun there.
I was going to comment on it, but I didn't want to interrupt you.
and it's really I saw that as a fourth generation. To me, I actually call this the Holy Grail, if you will. That if you can make the animal without the animal, and it really is the animal, that is the ultimate product. And I just fascinated. When I first learned about this back in 2013 or so. With the first introduction of cell-based meats in the form of a hamburger, done by obviously Dr. Mark Post, and that was really the advent and the onset of just really something I found really transformative, amazing potential, and as I was active, frankly, the last for quite a few years in my career, I've done a lot of public speaking on food trends. I increasingly found myself talking about alternative proteins, this is a transformative area. And as excited as I am about plant-based, I really saw cell-based as truly an enormous transformation opportunity to actually provide a whole muscle meat animal product without the animal. I really called that the Holy Grail. And as I studied the category and I learned more about it, I said, the real big opportunity here is, in my opinion, is seafood. To explain further, demand for seafood is at all-time high. So my whole career, I've witnessed people moving away from red meat towards seafood. So people are attracted to seafood because of the health benefits. So here's the problem. So demand is now at an all-time high. And we've also learned that in Asia, that demand could be easily 4 times U.S. per capita consumption. So it's only going to be increasing as the wealth in Asia gets increasingly higher. So what's the problem? The supply is diminishing dramatically. We're overfishing the oceans. On top of all that, we have illegal fishing, we have acidified oceans, we have warming oceans, we have algae blooms, we have climate change effects. We have a very vulnerable supply chain. Our planet is frankly doomed at this point, if we don't find another solution to feeding the world and the fish and the seafood that people need. And as Sylvia Earle and others have said so well, we need living fish in the ocean. We need to preserve that ecosystem. So for so many reasons, demand is high, supply is disappearing, supply is compromised, supply is vulnerable. And our supply also contains mercury, microplastics, environmental pollutants. So human health is a big concern here too. So if we can actually create a third solution, wild-caught, farm-raised, and now a sustainable cell-based solution, I really call that the Holy Grail. And particularly if we can do that in the whole muscle meat category, meaning fillets. It could be swordfish, Chilean sea bass, mahi-mahi, red snapper, all sorts of products that consumers really will love.
We're definitely going to get to that because, many of the companies in the cultured meat space are doing ground meat products, either burgers, sausages, chicken nuggets. You're doing whole cuts of meat, which is particularly fascinating. But before we get there, how did the company come about? Like, why does BlueNalu exist? Not the reason, but the logistics. How did it come to pass that this company and you are the CEO?
So actually, thanks for bringing me back there. So actually, literally just over 2 years ago, I was again I was at Rutgers University, running this Food Innovation Center, speaking a lot about food trends, and also doing some consulting, helping other universities set up similar food innovation ecosystems like we had in New Jersey. It was really a business cluster targeting really aggregating the whole food industry. And I was actually contacted by an amazing place to work, University of Hawaii. I did some work of all places. I said, okay, I'm in. And the University of Hawaii at Maui College actually called me up, the chancellor, and said, hey, can you do what you're doing at Rutgers here at University of Hawaii? I said, absolutely. And I was actually out there, talking about this, really trying to encourage and motivate Hawaiian entrepreneurs about what's going on in the food industry, some of the exciting areas. And here I was talking up again, cell-based as really being this holy grail, this huge opportunity. And sure enough, there was a venture capital team in the audience and said, I've been kind of fascinated by this category too. And sure enough, the company was formed in Hawaii.
Wow.
And the name BlueNalu, the word nalu is a Hawaiian word for wave. It's also a street slang word in Hawaiian. If you say nalu it, it's like go with the flow, but be mindful, be conscious, be considerate. So it's a perfect word for our company. Speaks to the heritage of BlueNalu. And we're also, kind of really feel Hawaii is an interesting location, interesting place. It's the center of the Pacific Ocean, 2,500 miles from any landmass. It's where our fish species come from. So it's an homage to the Pacific and our oceans. So it was really quite serendipitous that the company got founded there. And from that point, literally 2 years ago, we were fortunate to attract New Crop Capital to serve as a co-founder and lead investor in our seed round. And we subsequently raised $4.5 million shortly after we got organized. We really brought together a unique team that really hadn't been in this space before. And that has led to a lot of further investments, and we're quite excited to where we are today.
That's really great. That's really great. And in fact, I think that your seed round was the largest seed round of any of the cultured meat companies. Is that correct?
At the time, that's correct.
You've since been surpassed in seed round numbers. I take it by your statement.
Yeah, and there's some other companies. Even in the past week, there's been some companies in the cell-based fermentation and plant-based category. But certainly the cell-based category, there are. We're excited to see more activity. But yeah, at 18 months ago, we were certainly the largest seed round in the whole space globally.
Yeah, I think you're referring to the recent announcement in the Netherlands of Meatable, which just raised a $10 million seed round after making some advancements in growing pork without pigs. Particularly interestingly, I was talking to Don from Meatable, who told me that this is an aside, but they told me that, and what they've publicly announced is that they're not using muscle tissue from the animals. So they're using the umbilical cord, like a biopsy from the umbilical cord of the animal. So there never is even a need to have the whole animal to have the biopsy from in their case. Like it's just coming from this, afterbirth, basically. Just a pretty fascinating thing because, most of the time you think of this, you think, you need like some donor animal to give you the cells. In that case, maybe not even. I don't think fish have umbilical cords though, so I don't know if that's going to be...
unfortunately not.
I don't know if that's a possibility for you guys. All right, so this company, then you decide, okay, cool. Well, there's some money out there for this. Let's see if we can take the dive, and make this happen. And now you got $5 million in. I'm sitting in your office. I saw many staff members out there. You guys are feverishly working. You have a whole lab here where we were looking on a microscope. I think we were looking at red snapper cells that were, swimming around in the petri dish that they were in right there. It's very cool to see. I was salivating looking at those microscopic cells doing their thing. But you've made a lot of progress. You guys have actually been producing whole muscle cuts of meat. So before we talk about what we're doing today, tell me about that. Like, why did you pursue this strategy of whole cuts when most other companies are going for the lower hanging fruit or lower hanging meat, as it were, of ground products?
Yeah, we really saw, Paul, that the growth in the seafood industry is really in the finfish category in particular, on a global basis. And that's really an area that we could be quite unique and have a really differentiation from any company in either plant-based or cell-based, and have a very large niche. It's not even a niche. It's a really large opportunity that we felt would provide, frankly, a great deal of competitive insulation. The cell-based category and plant-based may compete in some of the ground products for sure, but the cell-based seafood category really lends itself to the whole muscle category. So we were quite excited by products that we knew we could execute, that were medallions, fillets, and products like that. But in the finfish category, but ultimately also crustaceans and mollusks too.
But isn't it harder to do? I mean, my presumption is that most seafood is sold in whole format, right? Not in ground format. There probably is some seafood that comes in ground, but most of the seafood products that I think of that people are eating are not like crab cakes or surimi. They are like lobster tails and whole fish products. I guess fish fillets are another ground product.
That's correct. Yeah, fish fillets. Yeah. So obviously in the ground category, in the beef side, we obviously have hamburgers and pork patties and sausage products. Yeah. But in the fish category, the counterpart is surimi, right? And which is really low value products.
Right. But fish sticks also are a ground product.
That's correct. Right? Also. Yeah.
So. My understanding is that, in the absence of having some vascularization, that it's hard to get the nutrients to those cells that are inside. That the reason why these companies are largely doing ground meat is because you can make sure you bathe the cells in the nutrients that they need. But you have somehow managed to crack that problem, right? That you can find ways to produce a thicker cut of meat where the inner cells are not going necrotic. In fact, they are thriving, presumably. Is that right?
That's correct. And I think obviously, in the ground category, you're also able to add other ingredients to the product and blend it in. Mm-hmm. And then you might also batter bread and fry it. So our whole focus is, to let the product be fully exposed, if you will, to really present the high value product. And that was really what attracted, frankly, a fair amount of capital company early on, because it was a category and an area that was not really being pursued by others.
Do you know if that's true now? I mean, I don't know. But there are other fish companies.
Definitely the fish companies, yes, that are pursuing these kind of whole muscle products. In our case, and we encourage all sorts of. This is a huge opportunity, and many companies we hope will be very successful here. And our approach has been to also, we've actually worked on 3 species so far that are all commercial. Yellowtail, mahi-mahi, and now as you saw this morning, red snapper. But our whole approach has been, Paul, to create this platform technology that allows us to show that we can do freshwater or saltwater fish across a broad array of finfish species. And that, for example, is one of our novelties. We're doing that without genetic modification. We're doing it in a very natural way, making muscle from muscle cells, fat from fat cells, connective tissue from connective tissue cells as well, and really demonstrating that we can really have a technology that allows us to really be a supply chain disruptor, with a broad array of species that makes us more of a full service provider, ultimately to both restaurants and also retailers.
Is it easier to culture fish cells than mammalian or avian cells?
I guess that the best way to answer that is nobody had ever worked on fish cells the way we have before. So I think this whole, as I know, this whole category began in mammals because that was a technology that people learned or they knew from universities. But there was really no knowledge. There's a total white space on the fish category.
A white meat space, perhaps. So is the original, though, like NASA research into culturing meat was from goldfish cells like 20 years ago. And so, these researchers in New York funded by NASA were growing goldfish cells. They did produce actual meat outside of the fish. They did cook it up. It smelled like fish. They weren't allowed to eat it because FDA didn't give them authorization to do so. But is what they did all that time ago, 20 years ago, at all comparable to what you're doing? Or do you think it's like apples and oranges?
I think it's apples and oranges. We didn't necessarily find that particular research that valuable for us. Okay. So we really began with protocols that did work on mammals and found that they did not work on fish.
Okay.
So we, our team has really been extraordinary that really developed our own isolation protocols and propagation protocols that are definitely quite novel.
Cool. My understanding of this, and correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that the costs of culturing fish cells can be lower than other cells because fish are cold-blooded animals. You don't need as much energy to keep your fermenter at a body temperature of a mammal, but rather as a body temperature of a fish, which is much lower. Is that true?
That is true. So obviously, fish obviously in the ocean, the temperatures are much cooler, as you mentioned, and we definitely found some variation in the temperatures that they do grow at, but it does very consistent with the temperatures that they're familiar with in the ocean or the seas where they're thriving. I think what's also unique about our technology is, as I know you're aware, Paul, we've also designed what factories look like. So our whole approach is to really understand not just how we can reduce our costs of the products, through a variety of media composition modifications that we're in the process of doing, but also to create a facility that has really high throughput. So treating this like a food factory that looks a bit like a microbrewery meets a traditional food processing factory. Will our products be vacuum packaged raw? Will they be fully cooked and grill marked, seared, smoked, or what have you? So that's why we're also working directly with strategic partners in the marketing, sales, distribution side already to really help understand the marketplace, what form product should be in. Is it be sold as an ingredient or a fillet? So seafood is used in so many different product applications. So it really does lend itself to just a great deal of diversity.
Presume, Lou, that the FDA gave you the green light to start selling. When would you have product in a single restaurant?
Our approach is to we developed this 5-phase strategy, which phase 5 is really large scale production. That's each phase that precedes that is basically 1/10 of that volume. So that phase 5 factory is about 150,000 square feet. So kind of working backwards from that, our phase 3 is the answer to your question. It's the point at which we will have a GMP inspected operation, good manufacturing practices, following FDA HACCP guidelines, hazard analysis critical control point, for production of seafood, and that will occur in the year 2021. So roughly 18 months from now, interesting time period. Our company is only 18 months old. In another 18 months, we feel that we will be in a position to sell product to the consumer, initially in restaurants here in Southern California. It is our goal that by the same time period, in mid-2021, that the FDA will have provided the regulatory pathway by which product can be sold. So we're working towards that joint deliverable of our having product readiness and the FDA inspected facility, coincide with the FDA regulatory pathway guidance.
Cool. Is the limiting factor for you the capacity to produce or the price of production? Now, not like CapEx prices, but the actual price to keep these so you can sell is something that the average consumer will be able to buy.
It's really all about. I think this whole industry has a number of milestones that they need to work through, both in pricing, as you mentioned, but also engineering, scale production. We also have issues around, consumer communication and nomenclature that needs to be worked through.
We will get to that. Don't worry.
We'll get to that. That's great. But it's really it's a series of issues that coincide with each other. So that's why our company is really working on kind of four aspects simultaneously. One is the biology, to really get our costs down and result in a animal-free, serum-free media that's reduced costs, no genetic engineering. Number two, engineering and operations structure that allows us to actually produce products that demonstrate scale production. Number three, getting through regulatory clearance and actually communicating with the FDA on a regular basis so that we can, in fact, develop the appropriate food safety and other guidelines that will be required. And number four, work with marketing organizations that will allow us to help understand the product application, the type of customer, the positioning strategy. So by working on all four of those concurrently, which we're doing, we feel confident that in 2 years' time, we will really be ready on all those burners, but also be then primed to then say, okay, we are now poised to go to phase 5 and break ground on our next first large-scale production facility, which our current model is about 150,000 square feet.
How much money are you going to need to do that? So you raised about $5 million for your seed round. What's your Series A going to be? Presuming there's a Series B. Like, what do you think you need in order to get to that stage 5 level?
Yeah, this whole category, all companies in our space do need a fair amount of CapEx for sure. CapEx, but also working capital to really bring on the right team, discover all these milestones, file for IP where it's appropriate, et cetera. So it'll be, our company and other companies are going to go through tens of millions in the A round, and they'll go through triple digits, hundreds of millions in B and C rounds. So that's kind of the scale that this category requires. So yes, companies like ourselves are in the multiples of tens at this point, and we're looking at the multiples of hundreds coming soon.
All right. Well, as a fish company, I'm sure you know something about scales. So let me ask you, before we get to the big reveal, Lou, of what's happening today, it's very exciting, but you mentioned nomenclature. So there, is a debate. Some people care more about it than others. When this category first came out, people were calling it in vitro meat. Then people thought actually it would be better to call it cultured meat. That sounds better. And then there was a switch to say actually consumers really prefer clean meat to cultured meat. Cultured sounds kind of scientific. Clean sounds like clean energy. And then some of the companies, not all, but some got together and said, actually, we think that cell-based is better because people in the meat industry are concerned that calling it clean meat implies that conventional meat is dirty and we don't want to alienate them. And now some folks like the Good Food Institute are saying actually cell-based meat polls pretty poorly with consumers. It's too sciencey. It's not whetting the appetite. And they're suggesting people should call it cultivated meat, which performs better with consumers. I don't know why every single one of these words is a C word. So you've got cultivated, cultured, cell-based, clean. Like they can't think of a single other letter to start a word with. But you've used the term cell-based. I've also heard you use the term cultured. Do you have an opinion on this? Do you care one way or the other? Like, what's your thought on having a term that is both accurate but also appealing to consumers?
Thanks for the question, Paul. I think, as you may know, we're also one of the 5 founding members of this new group called the Alliance for Meat, Poultry, and Seafood Innovation, AMPS Innovation. The 5 founding members are all in the cell-based category, and as as a group, we prefer the term cell-based or cultured versus any other names. And I think that the rationale for that, and as BlueNalu, we've used cell-based primarily, but we've also used the term cellular aquaculture when we describe our process. But we will actually be doing some testing in the near term to actually look at different kind of names and how they resonate, because the names really may, in fact, be quite different as consumers think about seafood versus meat. Does cultured also has a definition in the food industry about live bacteria.
Which is a good connotation. People think of cultured foods as having good gut health implications.
But of course, we don't want there to be any perception there's any live microorganisms in these products. So again,
yeah, for sure, it's not cultured in the same way, of course, yes. But
to answer your question, so we're there's other ways to describe this product. So A, there's a brand name that will resonate, and B, there'll be the common and usual name that'll be used on the to describe the process. We want consumers to know that our products are different, distinctive. What's really fabulous about cell-based seafood is we could also say that the product does not contain mercury or no microplastics, environmental pollutants. So our product has benefits. We want consumers to know that it's seafood. Our product also has allergens, like seafood does. You're allergic to seafood, you're allergic to our product. It is fish from fish shells. You will have the same allergies. So it's important, it's critical that consumers know that our product is cell-based and there's some differentiation about it, but it should be called what it is. If the product is mahi-mahi, which is a mahi-mahi, then maybe say made via cellular aquaculture or directly derived from cells of mahi-mahi or using cell-based processes. Something, words like that. And, with our research and the FDA's guidance, we will come up with a definition or some nomenclature that makes sense. But what's most important is we do not want to alienate ourselves or, the current industry. We don't want to say slaughter-free. That's alienating to, companies in the meat industry. Although we certainly recognize that our product is in fact slaughter-free. We also don't want to use words like lab-grown. That's alienating to us because all food products are made in the lab. And why should we try to imply to consumers that our products are made in some weird way? So coming from the food industry, foods are. Does consumers really care about how processed cheese is made or sausage or hot dogs are made or gummy bears for that matter?
Right.
So food industry has a lot of interesting dynamics how it's produced today.
Yeah, for sure. So, I hear you on all that. And I, despite the name of my book, Queen Meat, I don't have some fidelity to the term Queen Meat simply because the book is entitled that. It's a good title for a book. It's a provocative title,
Absolutely.
Which is useful for book purposes. I also don't mind cultured. It sounds fine to me. Cultivated also sounds fine to me. I've wondered, like cell-based in my own anecdotal experience, it whets very few appetites when I've used it with other people, with friends of mine who eat meat. It sounds very lab-grown-esque, cell-based. Like it's almost like, people have said to me they think it sounds like a turnoff. And that's why companies that are also part of this trade group, like Just, won't use it. They say it's too alienating to consumers to use it. And so they use cultured as an example.
Or cell-cultured might be another compromise. So again, we're doing our own research also. But the jury's still out on what's the appropriate name, and we need some.
Yeah, I'm sure that there will be some other word in the future that somebody comes up with too. Who knows what it'll be? But anyway,
call it just fish.
Well, I'm sure that Josh Tetrick at Just would really like it. Just mayo, just chicken, just fish. I'm sure he would really like that. But my view is that eventually it is just going to be called fish because that's what it is.
Yes.
In the same way, we think of ice today. We just call it ice. We don't call it artificial ice, even though that's what it was called when refrigeration came out. You had ice from nature, which was the only way to get ice for millennia. Then we had a technology that allowed us to produce ice, and it was called artificial ice at first, and now it's just ice. So in the same way that it's still just made from water, though. It's still just water. Well, this is the same type of cells. It's just being grown outside of the fish. So eventually, I think at first you need a differentiating term, obviously, just so people can understand what you're talking about. But eventually, I do suspect that you're just talking about fish in that case. Okay, so let me ask you, Lou, as we get ready to wrap up here, you spent decades in the meat industry. Now you are doing something that some people, at least at first glance, would say, hey, you're going in the other direction. Like, you're doing something that is not helping the fishing industry. You're doing something that's really going to put fishermen out of business, so to speak. What would you say to people who, from your former life, who make that charge against you? And how do you feel having moved from essentially one way of producing animal meat to another, where that doesn't involve actual animals and raising and slaughtering them?
Yeah, I mean, I think all the people I know in the food industry are so excited at what I am doing. Frankly, from all walks of life, that I've come from. I've seen, if you will, the dark side of the food industry and how product is produced. I've actually been in slaughterhouses, so. Like many people, I came to an awakening, that if in fact there's another way, and it now is another way. That was the way that we all knew when I grew up, and that was the food industry. And I'm so excited to have learned about this opportunity that cell-based represents, and to see the opportunity that, in particular, that seafood represents. I am just so excited to be able to lead this team to what we feel will be absolutely transformative to our planet. So we're all doing this because we need another solution. The world is running out of seafood, and it's a rare, once in a lifetime opportunity for me, for all of our team, for the world to be able to witness that there is in fact a new solution here. That we cannot continue to deplete the oceans. We need a new solution, and BlueNalu really needs the capital, needs the entrepreneurship. Needs companies to participate in this category to really accelerate our growth. It was exciting to read the recent report by A.T. Kearney that showed that by the year 2040, they're projecting that perhaps 35% of all meat produced in the world will be cell-based. 41% growth rate from the year 2025 to 2040, over 15 years. God bless.
Amazing.
That occurs. That'll only happen with an awful lot of capital, but it's really demonstrates that people are ready for this new solution, and we're excited to bring it to them.
Yeah. So speaking of the solution that you're bringing people to, give us the big reveal, Lou. What's happening at BlueNalu today?
Big reveal. So today, December 10th, 2019, we're quite excited to introduce in a private event to our investors. That we are, in fact, able to demonstrate a whole muscle yellowtail product. So what's really unique here, yellowtail is one of our first species that we've worked on. As I mentioned, yellowtail, mahi-mahi, red snapper, as well as other saltwater, freshwater fish we've worked on to date, probably about 8 different species thus far. But these 3 are all commercial fish that we plan to bring to market. But what we've been able to do is make these whole muscle medallions of fish tissue that actually perform the same as conventional yellowtail. What does that mean, perform the same? So if you look at the way seafood is consumed today or prepared by chefs, it's really 3 primary ways. Can it be cooked? Can it be cooked by searing, sautéing, grilling, smoking, frying, or even steaming, or using sous vide processes, things like that? Can it be cooked, if you will, via marination or brining, like poke, kimchi, ceviche? Many products are actually raw and then acidified when they're consumed by consumers. And third, can it be eaten raw? And does it maintain the texture and all the sensory characteristics that traditional, conventional yellowtail does? The answer is yes. So we're here today to demonstrate that our product performs the same way, the same sensory characteristics, everything you could think of, but most importantly, that it's cooked raw or eaten, or even able to be acidified in these various characteristics. So we're actually showing today 3 different global inspirations, European, Asian, and North American, with 4 different products, soups, appetizers, and entrees. That'll be served this afternoon here in San Diego.
All right. The $5 million serving right here in San Diego, happening today.
So 18 months since we got started. So this is, we've come a long way in 18 months.
Congratulations. It's really fantastic, Lou. All right. 2 final questions that every guest of this show gets asked. Number one, for any other entrepreneurs out there or people who maybe want to be entrepreneurs and they look and they say, that Lou Cooperhouse guy, he really seems like a cool guy. I'd like to do something like what he's doing. Maybe not cultured fish, but they want to do something. Are there any resources, books, videos, speeches, anything for want to be or current entrepreneurs who you think that you would recommend to them to get started on their journey?
Wow, great question. I think most importantly, there's certainly a lot of books to be read, and certainly all the business books are tremendous to kind of benchmark, kind of all the basics of entrepreneurship getting started. But it all begins with, and having been a coach of many companies that when I worked particularly at Rutgers, I've actually provide some sort of mentoring or coaching to over 1,000 different companies over 20 years while at Rutgers. And I think the most important thing is, what is your unique selling proposition? What's your niche? What makes you different? What makes you distinctive? There's so many products out there. There's so many markets. So it's really to think about, what is ultimately your differentiating characteristics. So in our case, it was being able to provide, mercury-free, plastic-free seafood, that supplements the global supply chain. In our case, in hindsight, it's a no-brainer. But there's so many products out there. Does the world need another hot sauce or some other things that are out there?
As a hot sauce connoisseur, I'm not going to denigrate the hot sauce industry since I do love it. But
a lot of competition, though.
Yes, yeah.
How do you stand out the competition? That's really the fundamental basics of any startup, and to really think hard about it.
Yeah, I actually read recently that speaking of that hot sauce actually surpassed ketchup as the number one condiment in America now. So largely thanks to Latinos, for which I am extremely grateful. Okay, final question. So you have this idea, growing fish without the fish. Many people, though, they want to make a difference in the world, but they're not sure about the idea. They want to do something maybe good for the planet, maybe good for public health or something. Are there any other company ideas that either you've considered or that you hope that somebody else would do since you are not doing it, that you think would have some positive impact in the world on some issue, whether social, environmental, or any other way that you think the world would be a better place if this company existed?
Wow, there's 1,000 ideas. We all need to do something. This whole double bottom line, triple bottom line strategy of really having businesses that not just provide an economic benefit, but clearly societal benefit is critical for all of us. To be driven by sustainability, it's clearly it's not just a trend, it's a requirement of our world to really make sure that all company startups really embrace not just a financial return, but clearly a societal return as well. Whether in the case of ocean health, whether it's doing something for coral reef restoration or doing something for cleaning up the plastics in the ocean with new devices there, helping with trawling, just embracing so many aspects of ocean life. That's just one category. But Paul, there's just so many opportunities. I think, all you need to do is read about some of the challenges our world has and think to yourself, what can I do to make a difference? What could be an impactful engineering or market solution that can make a difference?
Yeah. Well, maybe someday there will be a future guest on this show who will start their own company and they'll say, hey, I listened to that Lou Cooperhouse guy and he gave me the inspiration that I needed to start this company that is now doing something to protect the ocean. So when that day comes, I'll let you know.
I appreciate it, Paul. And hopefully many more entrepreneurs do come to the table.
It's great to talk with you, Lou. Congratulations again. And we look forward to this serving in just a little bit.
Thank you. Look forward to it too.
Thanks for listening. We hope you found use in this episode. If so, don't keep it to yourself. Please leave us a 5-star rating on iTunes or wherever you get your podcast. And as always, we hope you will be in the business of doing good.